الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدًا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، قال سبحانه وتعالى: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. قال سبحانه وتعالى: ومن يرغب عن ملة إبراهيم إلا من سفه نفسه ولقد اصطفيناه في الدنيا وإنه في الآخرة لمن الصالحين. إذ قال له ربه أسلم قال أسلمت لرب العالمين. ووصى بها إبراهيم بنيه ويعقوب: يا بني إن الله اصطفى لكم الدين فلا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. وقال سبحانه وتعالى: إن إبراهيم كان أمة قانتا لله حنيفا ولم يكن من المشركين. وقال سبحانه وتعالى: واذكر في الكتاب إبراهيم إنه كان صديقا نبيا. Respected ulama, my respected elders, my brothers, my sisters and my little ones, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. After praising the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending salutations on Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I begin as always by first thanking you, my host, for giving me this opportunity to convey the message of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And I pray to the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah accepts these efforts of yours in listening to this message. As I pray to the Almighty Allah that Allah accepts these efforts of mine in delivering the message of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My young friends, Eid al-Adha is around the corner. And very soon, in every masjid around the globe, irrespective of where this masjid is located, whether this masjid is in North America to South America, whether this masjid is in Africa in the midst of some desert or the plains of Siberia, very soon, in every masjid around the globe, after every prayer, you will hear the beautiful echoes of the takbir. Everything within the universe, from the fish in the ocean to the stars in the sky, bear witness to the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And very soon, you will hear the believers glorifying Allah after every prayer with the words, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, walillahi alhamd. Allah is the greatest, Allah is the greatest. There is no God worthy of worship but Allah, and Allah is the greatest, Allah is the greatest. And all praises are for Allah. The months of Hajj have arrived. And at this moment in time, as I address you and you listen to the reminder, the Hajis from every corner of the globe, the small, the big, the young, the old, the black, the white, are preparing to descend upon the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their millions. And when the 8th of Zil Hijjah arrives, they will make their way to Mina. And from Mina, they will make their way to the plains of Arafat. And they will beg for Allah's mercy and ask the Lord of the Arsh and Kursi to overlook their sins, so that they can return home just like the day their mother gave them birth, free and pure from sin. From the plains of Arafat, they will return to Muzdalifah. From Muzdalifah, they will make their way to Mina. They will pelt the shaitan. They will offer their sacrifice. They will shave their heads. And then they will make their way to the house of Allah and perform tawaf al-ziyarah. Then again they will return to Mina. And for the next 2 days, remembering Allah, they will pelt the shayateen. And finally make their way to the house of Allah and perform the tawaf al-wada' and return to their homes with tears flowing from their eyes, just like the day their mother gave them birth. Everything, my young friends, that happens in these beautiful days is about none other than Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam. When Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam finished making the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered Ibrahim, O Ibrahim, أذن في الناس بالحج يأتوك رجال وعلى كل ضامن يأتين من كل فج أميق. O Ibrahim alayhi salam, make the call. Now that you've made my house, tell the people to come and visit my house. Tell the people to come and perform tawaf. Tell the people to come and perform umrah. Tell the people to come and perform the hajj. And Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam said to Allah, Imam Baghawi relates in his tafsir on the authority of Ibn Abbas, O Allah, man yuballigh sawti. O Allah, who will convey the sound of my voice to the masses? O Allah, I'm in Makkatul Mukarramah. You ordered me to make the house in this barren desert. There is not a single thing that lives in this desert. There are no trees here. There are no animals here. There are no buildings here. O Allah, the masses and the people live hundreds and hundreds of miles away from here. O Allah, who will convey the sound of my voice to the masses? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wa salam, O Ibrahim, minkal adhan wa alayya al-balagh. Your responsibility is to make the call. It is my responsibility to convey the sound of your voice to the masses. Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wa salam, he climbs Mount Qubais, Abu Qubais, and then facing all the direction one after the other, the north, then the south, then the east and west. Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam made the call. Ayyuhan nas, inna rabbakum kad bana baytan fahujju. O mankind, O people, O believers, your Lord has made himself a house in Makkatul Mukarramah. Now come and visit this house. Come and make tawaf of this house. Come and perform umrah. Come and make the hajj. Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam made the call. The mufassirin and commentators of the Quran write, Allah conveyed the sound of the voice of Ibrahim alayhi salam to all those within the heavens and the earth, to those that were alive, to those that were not even born. And the people responded to the call and cry of Ibrahim, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Oh Allah, we are coming. Oh Allah, we are here. There are those who responded to the call once and read the talbiyah once. There are those that responded to the call twice and read the talbiyah twice. And there are those who kept on reading. And everyone now is performing hajj according to the amount of times they responded to the call and cry of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam with the talbiyah. Everything that happens in these days is about Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam. We talk about the house of Allah. When I see the blessed house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how this house, so simple, so beautiful, it stands tall, a cut above any house within the whole dunya. The name of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam comes to mind. وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَاعِيلُ رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Was he not that great prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who raised the foundations of this house and who Allah honored and whose child Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored? and honored him to make the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when he finished to make the house of Allah, he raised his hands and he begged for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and said, "Oh Allah, accept this offer of ours. Verily you are the all hearer and listener and the knower of all things." When I see the Maqam Ibrahim in the glass dome and how the Hajis push one another to make it a place of prayer and offer their 2 rakats of their tawaf, the name of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam comes to mind. فِي آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ وَمَقَامُ Ibrahim. Is this not the stone which contains the footprint of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, which has become the sign of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And was this not the stone on which Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam stood to make the blessed and beautiful house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When I see the well of Zamzam and I see the Hajis drinking to their heart's content and then applying this blessed water on their eyes and their faces and on their bodies, and I see the Hajis in their millions running to and fro from Safa to Marwa, to Safa to Marwa, the name of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam comes to mind. When I see how Makkatul Mukarramah, a barren desert, now has become the capital of the Muslim world, the name of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam comes to mind. The Quran says, وَإِذْ جَعَلْنَا الْبَيْتَ مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا. When I see, my young friends, the shops in Makkatul Mukarramah full of fruit, you find the fruits of summer there in winter, and you find the fruits of winter there in summer. All types of fruits, from pomegranates to guavas, from bananas to plums, from watermelons to leeches, the name of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam comes to mind. Was he not the Nabi of Allah who raised his hand and prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "O Allah, warzuq ahlahu min al-thamarati man amana minhum billahi wal yawm al-akhir." O Allah, give the people of Makkah fruits as their provision, those who believe in Allah and those who believe in the last day. When I see women roaming in the streets of Makkatul Mukarramah and in the Haram in late hours of the night, and in spite of the fact there are hundreds and thousands of men there, not one man raises his eyebrow with an evil intention, the name of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam comes to mind. Was he not the one that made dua, "Rabbi ij'al hadha al-balada amina"? Oh Allah, I beg you, make this Makkatul Mukarramah a place of peace and aman. My young friends, when I think of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself, the name of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam comes to mind. Was he not the one, after making the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "O Allah, Rabbana wab'ath fihim rasulan minhum." O Allah, send a messenger from amongst them, yatlu alayhim ayatika, who recites upon them your verses, the verses of the Quran, wa yu'allimuhumul kitab, and who teaches them the book, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْحِكْمَةِ, who teaches them the hikmah and the sunnah, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and who purifies them, إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ, verily you are the Almighty and you are the All-Wise. When I see tears flowing from the eyes of the people saying farewell to the Hajis, not being able to go to themselves and visit the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when I see people on wheelchairs, when I see people being carried on shoulders, when I see the old and weak with the walking sticks and that they can barely walk, when I see people that cannot even see, blind, making tawaf around the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, my young friends, the name of Ibrahim comes to mind. Was he not the one that made dua? "O Allah, فَجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِّنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ." O Allah, fill the heart of men towards them, full of love towards them. This is why we find, in spite of the fact that Hajj is a long, tiresome journey, and in spite of the fact a Haji goes through many a difficulty and experiences great difficulty in fulfilling this great obligation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, well, my friends, once he signed the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every Haji, irrespective of how much difficulty he went through, he yearns year in, year out, and he desires and he wishes and he begs Allah to take him again and again and again and again. This is all as a result of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. Everything about this Nabi was phenomenal. The tawakkul, the reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was phenomenal. His iman was phenomenal. The quality of iman was phenomenal. The yaqeen he had on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was phenomenal. The sacrifices he made for Allah and the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was phenomenal. His obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was phenomenal. And his character was phenomenal. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says in the Quran, Inna Ibrahim kanatun ummatan qanata lillahi hanifa. That this one individual himself was like an entire ummah. The sacrifices that he made for Allah and the deen of Allah, my young friends, are beyond our comprehension. Who can forget when the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came? How Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, without any doubt, without any hesitation, without any question, without any query, without any clarification, he was prepared to sacrifice his own child for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You and I, we will never be able to comprehend this sacrifice. This is beyond our comprehension. This is beyond our intellect. And this is beyond our understanding. We will never in our entire lives be able to comprehend the true nature of the sacrifice that Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam made. And the reason I say this, my young friends, is you and I, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are the blessed ones. We are the one who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has showered us with countless blessings. Allah has showered us with so much blessings that, you know what? If we were to fall in prostration at this moment in time and do not raise our heads from prostration till death do us part, my friends, our entire life, we will not be able to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for just one of his blessings. We are the fortunate ones. Look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with beautiful clothes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a beautiful house. Allah has given us beautiful cars. Look at the food on our table in breakfast time, at supper, at lunch. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with it has given us health. With it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given it wealth. And on top of this, look at the beautiful children that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, which are a comfort for our eyes. And all this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us without us ever raising our hands and begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without any test and trial, without any sacrifice, without having to prostrate and beg for Allah's mercy, without having to shed a single tear, without having to wake up for tahajjud. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us countless and countless blessings. يَهَبُ لَمَنْ يَشَاءُ إِنَاثًا وَيَهَبُ لَمَنْ يَشَاءُ الذُّكُورَ. To some of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a son. To some of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a daughter. And some Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has showered us with blessings, with so many sons and so many daughters. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these blessings without any effort and without any sacrifice, then my friends, how can we truly comprehend the sacrifice of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam? You know, you and I, we've taken these blessings for granted as if it was our right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us beautiful clothes, as if it was our right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a beautiful house, as if it was our right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a beautiful car, as if it was our right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us health and wealth. We've taken these blessings for granted. This is why we don't value the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I swear by Allah, the day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes one blessing away, this is the day you will realize the value of one blessing. The day Allah takes this blessing away, that is the only day you will realize the value of a blessing. At this moment in time, you're looking towards me. I'm looking towards you. Just imagine at this moment in time, as you're listening to the reminder, this thought has never crossed your mind. You're sitting here, you're listening to me. All of a sudden, you become blind. There's darkness in front. There's darkness behind. You're looking to the right hand side. You can't see anything. You're looking to the left hand side. You can't see anything. Now, my friend, you will realize the value of eyesight and you'll realize the value of this blessing. Why? Because within a zillionth of a second, it didn't even cross your mind. Within a zillionth of a second, from a totally independent human being, Allah has made you dependent within a zillionth of a second. Now all of a sudden, the thoughts that will be crossing your mind, my words can't even describe the thoughts that will be crossing your mind at this moment in time. How much concern and how much fikr and how much gham and grief and how sad you would be. And now you're thinking, yeah, how am I going to get home? Never mind getting home. My friend, now you're in such a position that you will not even be able to leave this gathering without assistance and without the help of your Muslim brother. And if you were the world's richest man and you possess $1 billion, and there was a market out there which sold eyes and eyesight, I swear by Allah, you would spend $1 billion just to buy yourself a pair of eyes so that you can see once again. Only now will you understand and comprehend the value of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at all times be grateful. The more grateful you are, لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. Allah says, I will give you more and more. But if you're ungrateful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then my punishment is very severe. And this blessing that Allah has given you in the form of children, it is the right of this blessing that just as the day they were born, you said in their ear and you told this child, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greatest, Allah is the greatest. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Oh my son, you're coming into this world. There is no God worthy of worship but Allah. This is your purpose in life. You remind your child of his purpose in life, right till death do his part. Just like Ibrahim said to his children, Ya baniya, inna Allah hastafa lakumuddin, fala tumutunna illa wa antum muslimun. Oh my children, don't let death come to you except in such a state that you are still believers in the one Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the right of this blessing. Indeed, you shower your children with blessings. You work day and night so you can give them the best clothing. You can give them the best footwear. You can give them the best education. But I ask you, my young friends, who is fulfilling the right of his child when it comes to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Who spends time and who gives preference to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over the dunyavi education? And who is fulfilling his rights with regards to this? Let it not be that this son and daughter of yours grabs you by the neck on the day of judgment and says, oh Allah, the reason I didn't pray is because my father never taught me how to pray. Oh Allah, the reason I never recited the Quran is because my father would give preference to the mathematics books and the chemistry books and the physics books, and he would tell me that this is more important than this book. This is why I can't read. Let it not be that he grabs you by the neck and says, oh Allah, I beg you, don't punish me, punish this individual. This is the right of this blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. How can we comprehend, if that is the case, that we've received these blessings without any sacrifice? How can we comprehend the sacrifice of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam? Only those to whom Allah hasn't given a child as yet, or those who Allah gave a child after 20 years of trying and begging and begging and begging. Only those individuals to some degree, and I say to some degree, can comprehend the sacrifice of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the reason I say some degree is because Allah hasn't taken away their child, or nor has Allah ever asked them to slaughter their child with their own hands. This is why they can only comprehend 1% of the actual sacrifice. Let me explain. As you're aware, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was married to our mother Sarah. First year of marriage, and in general the majority of us by the grace of Allah, first year of marriage, second year of marriage, within third year of marriage, by the grace of Allah in general, Allah blesses us with children. This is why I say, without any trying or sacrificing on crying, Allah blesses us. This is how much love Allah has for us. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam is married with our mother Sarah. First year of marriage, and there is no child. He makes dua, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. Oh Allah, I beg you, give me a righteous son. Second year of marriage, and there is no child. And Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam begs again, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. Oh Allah, you are the Lord of the Arsh and Kursi. Oh Allah, you give everyone children. Oh Allah, I beg you, give me also a righteous son. Third year of marriage, and again there is no child. And Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam again is asking Allah, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. Oh Allah, I beg you, give me a child. 5 years of marriage, and there is no child. 10 years of marriage, and there is no child. 15 years of marriage, and there is no child. And he's still making the dua, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. 20 years of marriage, and there is no child. And again he's making dua, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. 25 years pass, 30 years pass, 35 years pass, 40 years pass, 50 years pass, and there is no child, and he's still making the dua, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. And he's making this by day, and he's making this by night. Oh Allah, I beg you, give me a righteous son. Every day is passing, Ibrahim is becoming weaker. Ibrahim is becoming weaker by the day. His wife has now passed the age in which women normally give birth. And you know, logic and aql and the intellect says, the future is getting bleaker and bleaker and bleaker for Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. But you know, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam didn't believe in logic and intellect and aql. He believed in the one Allah. He believed in the Lord of the Arsh and Kursi. There was no such thing as, la taqnatu min rahmatillah, despairing and losing hope in the Almighty Allah. Why was there no such thing as losing hope? Why? Because Ibrahim believed in that one Lord, who is the Lord of the heavens and the earth. Nor is he the Lord of the heavens and the earth. He is the Lord of the Arsh and Kursi. Not only is he the Lord of the Arsh and Kursi, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. He introduces himself in the Quran that he is the Lord of everything that exists out there. All the worlds, all the galaxies, all the planets. He was praying to that very Allah. إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونَ. The one that makes the impossible possible. He was praying to that Almighty Allah. Whenever he desires and wills something, he says, kun fayakun, and it bees. He was, logic and aql says, okay, a child cannot be born in this age. But my friends, he was praying to that very Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created Hazrat Isa alayhi salatu wasalam from a woman, from Hazrat Maryam alayhi salam, without a father. He was praying to that very Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created Hazrat Hawa alayhi salam from the rib of Hazrat Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. He was praying to that very Allah, who created Adam without a mother and father. He was praying to that very Allah, who would give Hazrat Maryam alayhi salam the fruits of winter. He would give it to her in summer, and he would give her the fruits of summer in winter. When Hazrat Zakaria alayhi salatu wasalam would come and visit Hazrat Maryam alayhi salam, كلما دخل عليها زكريا المحراب وجد عندها رزقا. He will see all types of fruit there. He would see mangoes there in winter. He would see all types of fruits. And when he would see all these types of fruits, he would say to Hazrat Maryam alayhi salam, nobody comes to visit you. Where have these fruits come from? She would respond, قالت هو من عند الله. It comes from the Lord of the Arsh and Kursi, that provides for every living creature, whether it's in the depths of the ocean or whether it's in the skies. He provides for me. He was praying to that very Allah, who heard the cry of Hazrat Yunus alayhi salam. And where did he hear the cry of Hazrat Yunus alayhi salam? When Yunus alayhi salatu wasalam cried, La ilaha illa anta subhanak. Oh Allah, there is no God worthy of worship but you. You are pure and free from every defect. Inni kuntu min al-zalimin. Oh Allah, I was from amongst the wrongdoers. Where is Hazrat Yunus alayhi salam? When Allah heard the cry, he's in the stomach of a fish, in the darkness of the night, in the darkness of the ocean. Allah responds to the cry of Yunus and gives him refuge and protection and saves him and rescues him. He was praying to that very Allah that came to the rescue of Zakaria alayhi salam. When Zakaria made this dua, Oh Allah, inni wahana al-azmu minni washta'ala al-ra'su shayba wa lam akum bidu'aika rabbi shaqiya. Oh Allah, I've become old and weak. My bones have begun to crack. Oh Allah, my wife is barren. Oh Allah, the hair on my head have become grey. Oh Allah, I beg you, you are the one that gives children. Oh Allah, I beg you, give me a child. And Allah responded to the cry of Zakaria and gave him a son, Yahya alayhi salam. This was the being that Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was praying to. So thus, why should he despair? Why should he despair? And there's a lesson in here for every one of us, my young friends. Never despair and never lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Beg Him by day, beg Him by night. Prostrate before Him. And in your tahajjud, get up during the late hours of the night and make this dua with tears flowing from your eyes. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ. Oh Allah, give us wife and children which are a source of comfort for us and which are a contentment for us. Oh Allah, keep on begging and keep on asking. Inshallah, inshallah. One day, your dua will be accepted. Allah accepts every dua. There is not a single dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't accept. Allah Himself says, "Ujibu da'wat ad-da'ani ujibu da'wat ad-da'i idha da'an." When they call and when they ask and when they beg, I'm the one that responds and answers. As long as you make dua, you are begging Allah, you are focused to Allah. There is nothing inside your heart other than Allah, and you are praising Allah. You are sending salutations on Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you try and you try and you try. Allah will always answer your prayer. And how does Allah answer your prayer? Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, sometimes Allah gives you what you ask for. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does it in this manner, that any difficulty that was to fall upon you, Allah removes and eradicates that difficulty. And sometimes Allah gives you the reward in the next life. Thus, when you come in the next life and you see the reward that you're going to receive for every dua that you thought was not accepted, you will say to Allah, "Oh Allah, only if you had not accepted any one of my duas, so I would have received everything in the akhirah." Every dua is accepted, and it is accepted in this manner. And Ibrahim would make dua. 86 years of age, 86 years of age. This is when the dua of Ibrahim gets accepted. You know, you and me, when we pray to Allah once or twice, you know, we say He's not listening. He's forsaken us. He doesn't answer our prayer. This was the dear friend of Allah, the Khalil of Allah. 86 years of age. Day and night he cried and begged and begged and begged and begged. If this was the situation of the Khalil of Allah, then where are you and me in comparison to the Khalil of Allah? 86 years of age. Allah answers this prayer. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this in a beautiful manner. The hadith of Bukhari, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam is passing through Egypt. He has with him our mother Hazrat Sarah alayhi salam. And he tells our mother Hazrat Sarah that in Egypt there's a zalim king, a tyrant. And whenever he comes across a beautiful woman, he rapes her. And if this woman is accompanied with a husband, then he kills the husband. And if she's accompanied by a member of his family, he doesn't say anything to him. So he's saying to our mother Hazrat Sarah, okay, if he's to ask you with regards to me, you and me are the only believers on the face of this earth. Tell him that you are my sister. And what he was referring to was, you're my sister in Islam. Because every Muslim brother and sister are brothers and sisters. We are all the sons of Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. And it so happens that when the king enters her quarters, she's standing before the Almighty Allah in prayer. And just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, that you should seek the help of Allah through patience and prayer. This is why whenever Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in difficulty, he would always turn to prayer, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would eliminate the difficulty. Our mother Hazrat Sarah is in prayer. She's making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she's saying, "Oh Allah, Allahumma in kunta ta'lam anni amantu bik وبرسولك وأحسنت فرجي إلا على زوجي فلا تسلط علي هذا الكافر." Oh Allah, you know I believe in you. I take you as my creator. Oh Allah, I believe in your Rasul. Oh Allah, I preserve myself for my husband. Oh Allah, I beg you, do not set this kafir upon me. She's making the dua, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers the dua. When she finishes her prayer, this tyrant approaches her with evil intention. He extends his hand towards her, and then Allah makes it paralyzed. He says to her, "Pray to your God to make my hand better. And if your God makes my hand better, then I will set you free." She makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's cured, his hand's better. But he doesn't keep to his word. For the second time, he advances towards her with evil intention, and he extends his hand to grab her. And again, for the second time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes his hand paralyzed. Again, he says to her for the second time, "Pray to your Lord, ask him to make me better, and this time I will let you be." Our mother makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a second time, and again he's cured. But again he breaks his promise. And for a third time he extends his hand with evil intention. And again Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes his hand paralyzed. Again he begs, pray to your Lord and I will set you free. She makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at this time he honors his word. And at the same time he says to his people, take her away from here. She's not a human being. She's a jinniya, she's a shaitan. And at the same time he gives her a gift. And that gift was in the form of our mother Hazrat Hajar alayhi salam. Our mother Hazrat Sarah in turn gives this gift to Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And she says to Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, O Ibrahim, accept her. It is so possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you through her, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't given you through me. And it so happens at the age of 86, this dua of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam is accepted. And our mother Hazrat Hajar is expecting. And when our mother Hazrat Sarah saw this, she felt just like any other woman would feel in that circumstance. And she said, Ibrahim, it's too much for me. Take her away from here. Our mother Hazrat Hajar, not knowing what her outcome will be, ran away and began to reside next to a spring. Sayyidina Jibreel came down, gave her glad tidings that you're going to have a son and you're going to receive much good from this son. And she returns. The child is born and this child is called Ismail. Now my friends, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wished, he could have asked Ibrahim now to slaughter his son and sacrifice his son. And indeed it would have been a great sacrifice. Why? Because he begged and he begged and he begged. And he cried and he cried and he cried. And at the age of 86, Allah has given him a son. So if Allah ordered him now to sacrifice his son, it would have been a good sacrifice. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want to do this. Why? Because Allah doesn't want a good sacrifice. Allah wants the ultimate sacrifice. Allah wants the ultimate sacrifice. Indeed, it would have been a good and remarkable sacrifice. But sacrificing the child after birth would not have been an ultimate sacrifice. Let me explain. You know, if a child was born to you or me, indeed, we would have love for this child. Because Allah has naturally placed this love inside the heart of a mother and father. Okay, when the child is born, in spite of the fact that the bond is still weak, you don't really know this child, but the love that Allah has placed in the heart of a mother and father is so great that even then, when the child is a day old, 2 days old, you would be prepared to sacrifice your life for this child. And let's say this child was to die there and then, or after a few days. Naturally, you would be affected. Why? Because this is your child, your flesh and blood. It has your blood running inside it. His flesh was made from you. So naturally, you would cry and you would be saddened. Compare this, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took your child away at the age of, let's say, 10. I swear by Allah, the grief, the sacrifice, the crying, and the sadness, if Allah took your child away at the age of 10, would be 1,000,000 times more than if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took your child away at the age of 1 or straight after birth. Why? Because when the child is born, you have this natural love inside your heart for this child. But as every day passes, the love is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. And the bond between you and the child is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. You know, when the mother holds the child and she places the child next to her chest and she feeds the child, 5, 6, 7 times a day when the child is born, the love begins to increase. When the child begins to smile at the mother and father, I swear by Allah, you can't put a price to that smile. The love you have for your child, when the child smiles at you, and he can now recognize you as the father and you as the mother. And when you walk inside that house and that child, a few months old, smiles at you, you can't put a price to that smile. The love goes to the 7th heaven. And then, when the child begins to crawl, the love becomes even greater. When the child begins to walk, the love becomes even greater. When the child addresses you with his first words, Amma, Abba, Oh, Allahu Akbar. That makes us crazy. The love increases. And then, when you associate with the child, you play with the child, you educate the child, you hold his hand, you go play football with him, you take him to the park. The love is increasing day by day by day by day. Now when the love reaches its peak, let's say at the age of 10, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes that child away. Believe me, words cannot explain the sadness and the difficulty that you will experience as a result of losing the child at the age of 10. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the ultimate sacrifice. And Allah himself paves the way for the ultimate sacrifice. Now what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? He orders Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, he orders him. Hadith of Ibn Abbas. Okay, take this child and take this mother and leave them in Makkatul Mukarramah. Leave them. Remember, 86 he received this child. According to the commentators of the Quran, one narration is, when Allah ordered him to do this child of his Ismail was only 2 years of age. 2 years of age. And Allah is saying, take him and his mother and leave them in Makkah. Makkah was not even 0.001% of what Makkah is today. Makkah, what it is today, in those days, all Makkah was a barren desert. There was nothing there, nothing. Not even one drop of water you could find in Makkah al-Mukarramah. No animals, no trees, no human beings. All you would find in Makkah is a barren desert, burning sun, scorching heat, so hot that even the mountains had become black. The house of Allah at the time was just a hill. It had been raised at the time of floods, or it had been destroyed when the floods of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam came. So even the house of Allah was just a hill. And here Allah was ordering Ibrahim to take this 2-year-old son of his and leave him there with his mother. And Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam came to take them. And every time Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam passed a pasture and green grass, he would say to Jibreel, Amin, is this where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordering for me to leave my child? And Jibreel Amin would say, Allah, this is not the place. Every time he would pass some greenery, he would say, is this the place? And Jibreel Amin would not, this is not the place. Till they got to this barren desert. And when they got to this barren desert in which there's nothing, Jibreel Amin said, this is the place where Allah is telling you to leave your wife and your child. And he leaves his wife and child. You know what he leaves them with? A bag of dates and some water, a water bag. This is all he leaves them with. One bag of dates and a water bag. He leaves them there next to the house of Allah, which is a hill. And you know what? And now he returns. And our mother Hazrat Hajar says, Ya Ibrahim, ayna tadhhab? Oh Ibrahim, where are you going? أتتركنا بهذا الوادي الذي ليس بها أنيس ولا شيء? You're going to leave us in this valley in which there's no human being, never mind human being, there is nothing here. You're going to leave us here? And Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam doesn't even respond. She asks again, Ayna tadhhab ya Ibrahim? Oh Ibrahim, where are you going? Are you going to leave us here? Again she asks, oh Ibrahim, where are you going? And Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam doesn't even look back, never mind respond. And then Allah places it in her heart and she asks, oh Ibrahim, Allahu amaraka bihadha? Did your Lord tell you to do this? And Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam said, indeed, my Lord has told you to leave you here. And she says, إِذَنْ لَا يُضَيِّعُنَا. If that's the case, then your Lord will never let us go to waste. Look at the level. There's two things here I want you to bear in mind. The objective is not to relate a story. The objective is to learn the lessons from this story of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. Two things. Look at the level of iman. Not of just Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, but our mother Hazrat Sarah alayhi salam. Come as come Ibrahim, Allah blessed him with prophethood. Our mother Hazrat Sarah wasn't a prophet. Look at the level of iman, number one, and look at the tawakkul, the reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reliance of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, that he's leaving his 2-year-old child and his wife in a desert where there's not even a drop of water, and he is leaving them alone. And look at our mother Sarah. You know, our women and our wives, you know, the day you don't come back from work to home and she has to sleep on her own accord. Do you understand? She's so terrified, she will never forgive you till death do us part. And the day you lay thereafter, you will get a zillion phone calls. And here, our mothers at Sarah, as Hajar, not a single thing there. You know, the earth is her bedding and the heaven is the garment to cover her. That is what she's got. A few days and some water, and she's going to be there all alone. Her reliance upon Allah. If Allah's told you this, then I've got this much yaqeen and belief that the Lord of the Arsh and Kursi won't let me go to waste and He'll look after me. You know, this thing called tawakkul, relying upon Allah, believing that He is the one that does everything. Nobody has the power to harm without the permission of Allah. Nobody has the power to benefit without the permission of Allah. It's not the eyes that see. The eyes are just a mean. Allah makes them see. It's not the ears that hear. They just mean. Allah makes them hear. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose that this ear doesn't hear, then this ear, in spite of the fact it can be in fully working order, it will not hear. It's not the legs that walk and the feet that walk. Allah makes them walk. Having this belief and yaqeen in Allah and relying upon Him and believing, fearing no one but Allah, this is what is known as tawakkul. And this tawakkul is an attribute of the true believers. Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِّرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. The believers, when they are reminded of Allah and the punishment of Allah, their hearts are full of fear. And when the verses of the Quran are recited upon the believers, this increases their iman and they rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the attributes, the main attribute and sifat of the 70,000 people that will enter paradise without any reckoning and without any punishment, the biggest attribute that they possess is this attribute of tawakkul, and they rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas very quickly relates a hadith. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, different nations were presented upon me. And I saw a Nabi and he had a small group of people. I saw another Nabi, he had 2 or 3 people. I saw another Nabi, he had no people whatsoever. Then all of a sudden, a large group of people was presented before me. And I thought this was my ummah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, this is Musa alayhi salam's ummah. Then all of a sudden, I saw a large group of people, even larger than the first group. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, look at the horizon. And I looked at the horizon and it was full of people. And then He said, look on the other side. And I looked on the side. And that was also full of people. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to me, this is your ummah. And with them, there are 70,000 people that will enter paradise. Allahu Akbar, how fortunate they are. There will be no hisab and there will be no adhab. No punishment, no question, straight into paradise. Allahumma ja'alna minhum. Allah make us from amongst the 70,000 that will enter paradise like this. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this, he left the gathering without telling the Sahaba who the 70,000 were. The Sahaba began to discuss with one another, who are these 70,000? Some of them said, it's the Sabiqeen al-Awwaleen, the former that sacrificed everything for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the ones that are going to go into paradise. Some of them said, no. These people are those who did not see Rasulullah, but were born as Muslims, and they lived their lives in such a manner that they didn't associate any partners with Allah. These are the ones that are being mentioned. Some said other, they kept on expressing different opinions. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned, and when he saw that their Sahaba were discussing, he asked them, what were you talking about? They said, Ya Rasulullah, we were talking about the 70,000 that are going to enter paradise without any hisab and without any adhab. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained, who are these 70,000? هم الذين لا يرقون ولا يسترقون ولا يتطيرون وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. لا يرقون, they don't give taweez. لا يسترقون, they don't take taweez from anyone. وَلَا يَتَطَيَّرُونَ, they don't believe in omens, bad omen, good omen. The Arabs, when they used to see a black crow, if they intended of going on a journey, when they see a black crow, they wouldn't go believing that this brings bad luck. No, these people don't believe in any omens whatsoever. وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ, they rely entirely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their belief totally is in Allah. They rely totally upon Allah. These are the 70,000 that will enter paradise. So Uqasha ibn Mihsan was from amongst the gathering. He said, Ya Rasulullah, make dua to Allah that I'm from amongst the 70,000. Allahu Akbar, Qurban Jai on these Sahaba. Qurban Jai, when they would hear virtues like this, they wanted to be part of it. They wanted this khair and goodness from Rasulullah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, O Uqasha, you are from amongst the 70,000 that will go without any hisab and without any adab. When another Sahabi saw this guy, it's his lucky day. He's got paradise. Let me also receive this. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I beg you, make dua that I'm also from amongst them. And Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam on that occasion said, Sabaka biha Uqasha. Uqasha's beat you to it. We need to bring this sifat within us. Look at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his reliance upon Allah. He's returning from Ghazwa Zatul Riqa. And it's time, afternoon, siesta, tired. He wants to rest under the shade of a tree. He takes his sword, leaves it hanging on a branch. A mushrik by the name of Ghawrath, seeing that the Sahaba far and wide and spread and everyone's sleeping, taking advantage of this situation, he takes the sword of Rasulullah and he places it on the neck of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he says to Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tell me now, O Muhammad, man yamna'uka minni, who will protect you from me? He's got the sword on the neck of Rasulullah. Logic and aql says, within a second, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will not be there. This is what logic and aql says. Look at the reliance upon Allah Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had. That in spite of the fact the sword is in his hands, it's on the neck of Rasulullah. And when he said, who will protect you from me? Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said thrice the words, Allah, Allah, Allah. The sword fell. Rasulullah took the sword. Now you tell me who will protect you from me. And he said, Kun khayra akhid. Show sympathy, so compassion. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you testify there is no God worthy of worship but Allah, Muhammad is the messenger. He said, no, I don't testify this. Nabi Kareem, he promised Rasulullah, I will never fight you and I will never side with the people that will fight you. And Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam let him be, and he returned to his people saying, Ji'tukum min inda khayra nas, I've come to you from the best of all people. Now the objective of relating this hadith, look at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reliance upon Allah. Do you understand? It's not the sword that does the killing. If Allah allows him to do it, it will happen. And if Allah doesn't allow him to do it, then it cannot happen. This is why when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Ghari Thawr, and the kuffar were literally on top of the cave, and Abu Bakr could actually see them. He said to Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, if one of them just looks down at his feet, he will see us. This was the fear of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala an. Such was the reliance of Rasulullah upon Allah that even on that occasion he said to Sayyidina Abu Bakr, in spite of the fact that the kuffar were there before him, he says to Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Oh Abu Bakr, what's your opinion with regards to two men, the third of which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That Allah's there. Allah will help us. They can't do anything to us. Even if they're there, but never mind there. Even if they were to enter the cave, they can't harm us without the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of us. So reliance upon Allah. The second attribute was belief. If I continue, we're going to be here all night. So I'm just going to have to cut it very, very short. And let me just give you a formula with regards to how you strengthen your belief. Because this formula, not only will it help you to strengthen the belief, it will always also create this sifat of tawakkul within you. Formula is very simple. Ilm brings about ma'rifat. Ilm brings about recognition. Ma'rifat is recognition. Ma'rifat brings about love. Love brings about a'mal. And the a'mal are the things that strengthen the iman. Simple. Ilm brings about recognition. If you don't even know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, how are you going to love him? You can't love anyone that you don't know. You don't know me, I don't know you. You don't love me, I don't love you. But the day we start hanging around with one another, now the connection is there. The more you stay with me and the more I stay with you, day by day the connection will become stronger and stronger and stronger. That's where the recognition is. And when the recognition is there, now I will begin to love you, you'll begin to love me. So you need to know who Allah is. And when you know who Allah is, when you ponder over the attributes of Allah, and you realize He's the Lord of the Arsh and Kursi, the Lord of the heavens and the earth, the Lord of the entire universe. He provides for every single being, from the fish in the ocean to the birds of the sky. Such is His knowledge that nothing is hidden from Him. Balki at this moment in time, the thoughts that are crossing your mind, He also knows about the thoughts. If there was something inside a rock, and this rock was in the depth of the ocean, or it was somewhere in the heavens on the earth, Allah knows of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring the atom and bring the iota. Such is His power that He's created the earth. The earth in comparison to the sun is 100 times smaller. The sun is one star. Then you have millions of stars within the galaxies. You have millions and millions of galaxies within the universe. Everything that you see there above is within the first heaven. After this you have 7 heavens. The distance between the first heaven to the second heaven is 500 years. Second to the third, 500 years. Third to the fourth. Keep on going like this. 500 years. After the 7 heavens, you have the kursi of Allah. The kursi of Allah is so great. In comparison to the 7 heavens, it's like a ring in a desert. After this, you have the arsh of Allah. The kursi of Allah in comparison to the arsh is like a ring in a desert. When you begin to know these kind of things, you will begin to love Allah. When you begin to love Allah, this is when, my friends, you will begin to give your life for Allah. You will give your children for Allah. You will sacrifice your wife for Allah. You will sacrifice your work for Allah. You will sacrifice your house for Allah. You will sacrifice everything that you possess for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you will try your most best to please Him and do everything that pleases Him. You'll get to a stage like Abbad ibn Bishr, standing in prayer before the Almighty Allah. Arrows are piercing his body one after the other. Such was the love that he had for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as every time the arrows is hitting him, he's taking the arrow, chucking it away. There's no pain there whatsoever, and he continues to recite and recite and recite. The only time he breaks his salah is because he was on guard, on protecting Rasulullah. When the thought of in his mind crosses that, my death may jeopardize the safety of Rasulullah, does he break his prayer? Sila ibn Asham marries Mu'adha al-Adawiyah. First night of marriage, my young friends, you know what? Normally on the first night of marriage, there's sparkles everywhere. It's like bonfire night. Yet these people had so much love for Allah that, in spite of the fact on a normal night, when you get married on the first night, there are many other things that are crossing your mind. Allahu Akbar. Such was the love for Allah that both this husband and wife had, that the love of Allah was far greater than the love for one another. Sila ibn Ashim spends the whole night in worshipping Allah, and at the same time Mu'adha al-Adawiyah spends the whole night worshipping Allah. It was because of this love that Rasulullah had for Allah that he would stand in prayer for so long, that his feet would swelter, and then they would begin to crack. And when Hazrat Aisha would see Rasulullah exerting himself, she would say, Ya Rasulullah, why do you exert yourself? Why do you worship Allah so much? Why do you sacrifice so much? You don't need to do this. You're second to the Almighty Allah. Allah has forgiven, overlooked all your sins. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say, if that's the case, should I not be a grateful slave? He would stand in tahajjud for so long. Huzaifa ibn al-Yaman is standing with Rasulullah in prayer, and Rasulullah begins Surah Al-Baqarah. He thought that after 100 verses, he'll go into ruku. 100 verses pass, and he's not gone into ruku. He reads the entire Baqarah. After Baqarah, he begins Ali Imran. After Ali Imran, he begins Surah Nisa. And Rasulullah wouldn't recite like you and me. He would recite clearly with tajweed. Not only this, every verse in which there was a question, su'al, he would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any verse in which there was glorification, he would glorify Allah. Any verse in which there was seeking refuge, he would ask for protection from Allah. He read all this in one rakat. Then he went into ruku. His ruku was about as long as his qiyam. Then he went into qawma. His qawma was as long as his ruku. Then he went into prostration, and his prostration was as long as his qiyam. This was just one rakat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abdullah bin Mas'ud, a young companion, full of health, standing behind Rasulullah in prayer. He says once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his tahajjud, he prayed so long that a bad thought crossed my mind. So the Sahaba asked him, what was the thought that crossed your mind? He says, but the thought that crossed my mind was, let me sit down and pray and let Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam stand up, because I couldn't keep up with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is all down to love. When you begin to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is when you will do a'mal. And when you start doing a'mal, this is when your iman will become strong. And when your iman is strong, you will begin to rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything. I'm just going to quickly finish this story, because I know it's well past your bedtime anyway. Where was I? Now, as Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, that he leaves him there. And he returns. Now, when he gets to a place where the child and the mother cannot see, this is where he raises his hand and makes dua. رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِنْدَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ. Oh Allah, I'm leaving this son of mine and I'm leaving this wife of mine. Oh Allah, in a valley where there's no cultivation, there's no crops, there's not even a dana, there's not even a grain. Oh Allah, I'm leaving them next to your sacred house. Why am I leaving them? رَبَّنَا لِيُقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ. Oh Allah, so that they take you as the Lord and they worship you, they prostrate and they keep your house pure and clean from all types of impurities. Oh Allah, fill the hearts of men with love towards them, and oh Allah, give them fruits as provision. He makes this dua, he goes. Now our mother would eat from the bag that he left, and at the same time she would drink the water. But how long was that water going to last for? And how long were the dates were going to last? And after a few days, there's no water, there's no dates. She can't feed the child. Now the child is crying. The child is suffering. She's also suffering and dying of thirst. She's a mother at the end of the day. She can't see her son suffer like this. So what she does, she distances herself from the child. And now in desperation, she climbs Mount Safa to see if she can see someone with water. Can she ask someone for help? But at the same time, there's no one there whatsoever. She's thinking of the child. She comes down to see the child. She runs in the valley. The child is alive. It's still crying and suffering. She can't tolerate. She now goes onto Marwa and she does the same thing there, looking for someone to help. There's no one to help. Back to Safa, back to Marwa, back to Safa, back to Marwa. This is the sa'i that Rasulullah ﷺ said people perform. You know, this amal of us was so good, and Allah loved it so much. Allahu Akbar, inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'irillah. That from that day, from right till the day of judgment, everyone will make sa'i between Safa and Marwa. Allah loved her amal so much. You know, you need to do a'mal which Allah loves. Look her amal, her running around in desperation. Allah loved this so much that He's ordained right till the day of judgment. Whenever you go for Hajj, you will do exactly like your mother Hazrat Hajar alayhi salam did. And now she's on Marwa and she can hear a voice. So she talks to herself, get a grip of yourself. She can hear the voice for a second time. And she says to the voice, if you come to help, then I beg you help. And before she knows it, Jibreel Amin is where the well of Zamzam is today. With the back of his heel, he hits the earth and water begins to spring forth. Now they drink and they feed the child. Allah had blessed Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And how did He bless him? Is that Allah had, the earth would shrink. And He would come regularly, and He would cover long distance in a short time. The earth would shrink and He would come regularly to visit this son of his Ismail, to play, to love, to share, to educate, just as a father would do with his child. And just how much love do you think he had for his son? Because he would see him not on a daily basis like you and I. You know, when you see someone after a few days, the love that you have is 1,000,000 times more than when you see a person on a daily basis. So he would express his love. Now the child is growing and growing, and he reaches an age where he can look after himself. Sayyidina Ibn Abbas says that the child is 13 years of age. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants him to slaughter this child with his own hand. 13 years of age. After all that he went through with regards to this child and the difficulties that he's experienced, now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sees a dream that he's sacrificing his child without any question, without any hesitation, without asking Allah clarification. My friends, he comes immediately to his child and says, Ya bunayya, inni ara fil manami anni azbahuka fanzur maza tara. I saw that I was sacrificing you in a dream. Tell me, what is your opinion? You know, this is a 13-year-old child. You know, try this with your own child. See what response that you will get. 999. How dare you even talk about that? You know, this child was Ismail. He was the son of Ibrahim. No ordinary child. They say like father, like son. You know, the child knows that now is the time come for me to leave this world. The child knows I will have to leave my mother and father, who he loves daily. But look at the obedience that he showed his father and he showed Allah. He said to his father, Ya abati fal ma tu'mar, satajiduni insha'Allah min as-sabirin. Oh Abba, you do as Allah has told you. I am not from amongst those that will moan and groan. I am not amongst those that will reject the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You do as you please. you will find me from amongst those that remain patient. Lesson of obedience for our children. Lesson of obedience for our children. Look how obedient Ismail was to his father. Unfortunately, it's sad that I can't actually go into the detail. I'm just going to have to finish the story. So come as come, at least you can take something back. But in here you had lesson of obedience to Allah and lesson of obedience for the children to their fathers. So now the time has come for the sacrifice. He's taken him to the jungles of Mina. Shaitan wants to exploit this situation. He comes to Hajar. Oh Hajar, do you know where Ibrahim's taken Ismail? Yes, to gather firewood. No, he's not. He's going to slaughter him, to sacrifice him. He claims that Allah has told him to do this. Our mother Hajar says, then the best thing Ibrahim can do is do what Allah says. Comes to the son Ismail. Oh Ismail, do you know where your father's taking you? Yes, to gather firewood. No, he's not. He's going to sacrifice you. And he claims that Allah has told him to do this. The child says to Shaitan, not knowing it was the Shaitan, says to the Shaitan, it's best that he does whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered him to do. Comes to Ibrahim. Oh Ibrahim, you saw Shaitan in the dream. The Shaitan was telling you to sacrifice your son. Sayyidina Ibrahim knew this was the Shaitan. He says, get away from here, let me carry out the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the time of sacrifice, Ibn Abbas relates. The child says to the father, oh Abba, tie me with a belt so that I'm unable to move when you sacrifice me. And at the same time, keep your clothes well away from me so that they don't become covered with my blood. Because when you return with clothes covered with my blood and my mother sees them, this will sadden my mother. And Abba, when you sacrifice me, make haste so that it's easy upon me. Give my mother my salam and remind her of the reward of those that remain patient. Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam began to kiss the child and said to Ismail, Ni'mal aun anta ya bunayya. How helpful you are, my son. Look at the patience of the child. With Iman comes difficulty. You and I, we think just because we've said La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, there's no difficulty and we're just going to enter paradise. True believers, with Iman comes test. Look how much Rasulullah was tested. And look at how the Sahaba were tested. In every generation, the believers have been tested. And at this moment in time, you and I are also tested. And it's important that we pass this test. Now, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam passes the knife on the throat. And Allah changes it to copper and the knife has no impact. And the child says, oh Abba, turn me the other way. Maybe your heart may soften as a result of which you can't carry out the command of Allah. And the angels are gobsmacked with regards to the patience of this child. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls out, enough and is enough, Ibrahim. You have fulfilled your dream. And Allah sends a lamb from paradise. He turns around, he sees the lamb from paradise. And he slaughters the lamb. The child's hands were tied. Jibreel Amin unties him. When Ibrahim saw this, he asked, who untied your hands? He said, the very being who brought the lamb. Look at this, look the sacrifice. We can never comprehend this sacrifice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested, I'm just going to conclude here. Allah tested Ibrahim in many ways. Many ways Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested Ibrahim. This is what Allah says in the Quran. وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ. Test after test after test. How else do you think he became Khalilullah? And look at, if you ponder over the words of the Quran, Allahu Akbar. We need to study this book, the Jami'iyyat and the Balaghat and the Fasa'at of this book. Allah says in the Quran, إِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ. His Lord. The word Rabb is somebody that does tarbiyah. Tarbiyah. Allah tested Ibrahim. Didn't Allah know what the outcome was? Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew what the outcome was. This is why the test wasn't a test of that nature. What it means here, Allah was doing tarbiyah of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, so he reaches his perfection and becomes the Khalil of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Test after test after test. And I'll just conclude with these words. This life for you and me is also a test. This life for you and me is also a test. Let me just ask yourselves and remind myself. What are we doing here? People come. What do they say? What do you say in their ears? Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And people go. What do they read before they go? La ilaha illallah. They begin with the journey, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, and they leave the world, la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Have you ever pondered or contemplated or thought what we're doing here? What is our objective in life? Is it to acquire the dunya? خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Allah's created life and death. Why has He created you? To see who from amongst you will do good deeds. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I've created you for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is you bow and prostrate. Ask yourself, my young friend, how much of that purpose have you fulfilled? Accountability starts from the age you become baligh, right till death do us part. Forget the years to come. Let us, every one of us, ask ourselves, from the day we became baligh and became mukallaf and responsible for our actions, from that day to this day, how much of this purpose have we fulfilled? And you can ask yourself by looking at your namazis. Have you offered every namaz and the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would offer? Have you given your zakat? Have you fulfilled your hajj? Your obligation towards your creator, your obligation towards your relatives, your wives, your children, your mothers, your fathers, the sins. Have you refrained from sin? Al-kayyisu man dana nafsuhu wa amila lima ba'da al-maut. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was once asked, okay, who's the wisest of all men? Who's the clever man? You probably tell me, oh, mashallah, it's a scientist. Somebody will say, no, it's a teacher. Somebody will say it's a pharmacist. No. It's no pharmacist, no scientist, no alim, no hafiz, nothing. The wisest of all men, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, is he who sacrifices his desires and he fulfills his purpose in life by performing deeds, good deeds, for that life that is to come after death. This is the wisest of all men. Conclude with the hadith. As every day passes, Sayyidina Ali Bukhari, every day passes, the dunya is coming to its end and the akhirah is coming forward. And each one of the two, the dunya and the akhirah, has children. People that are inclined towards them, there are some that are inclined towards the dunya. They spend their day and night. This is their purpose in life, to get one bungalow to two to three, career after career. This is their purpose in life. And there are those who work for the akhirah and to achieve the akhirah. Sayyidina Ali concludes, فَكُونُوا مِنْ أَبْنَاءِ الْآخِرَةِ. Become the children of the akhirah. وَلَا تَكُونُوا مِنْ أَبْنَاءِ الدُّنْيَا. Do not become the children of the dunya. Why? فَإِنَّ الْيَوْمَ عَمَلٌ وَلَا حِسَابٌ وَغَدًا حِسَابٌ وَلَا عَمَلٌ. Today is the time to do good deeds, and there is no accountability for what you do whilst in the dunya. Tomorrow, there will be accountability, and if you say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I beg you, give me another chance, let me go back and I will prove myself, then that will never come. So my friends, on this note I will conclude. Allah give me the tawfiq, Allah give me the understanding to fulfill our purpose in life and follow in the footsteps of these great prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who sacrificed and who showed obedience and reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all these things. Wa akhiru dawana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.